Now in safe waters, everyone's trying to find a signal, eager to both receive information and let their loved ones know they've gotten out safely. While the Chinese workers are being offloaded from this ship and taken to the airport to catch a flight home, you can see behind me the HMS Cumberland preparing to go back to Benghazi and carry out further evacuations. Cal Perry, AlJazeera, aboard the cruise Roma in Malta.
Well, in the last few minutes, it's been announced that 2 military planes have airlifted 150 Britons from the Libyan desert, and they have now touched down in Malta as well. Well, earlier on Saturday, the UK Prime Minister David Cameron met his government's Crisis Response Committee, known as COBRA, to discuss the unrest in Libya. Cameron has returned from a tour of the Middle East after being heavily criticised for his slow response to the crisis. Earlier, he joined other European leaders in saying the United Nations and European Union should take urgent action. That's all from me for the moment. Now back to Doha.
Half past this news hour on Al Jazeera. Good time to remind you of the latest from Libya's uprising. Residents in the capital bracing for more violence. They say the regime is arming civilian supporters to set up checkpoints and roving patrols trying to restrict movement around the city. Other reports say Gaddafi's security forces in some Tripoli suburbs are actually switching sides. And much of the rest of the country is in the hands of Gaddafi's opponents. In the eastern city of Benghazi, many banks managed to reopen, but some are worried about food supplies and basic services. Unrest carries on around the region. We'll look at Yemen first, where a leading tribal figure has resigned from the president's party and called for his overthrow. Major blow for Ali Abdullah Saleh, coming as another tribe also announces its support for the opposition movement. Hashim Al-Bara with more now from Sana'a.
A prominent leader of Yemen's most powerful tribe, Hashid, has announced he's endorsing the anti-government movement. Hussein Abdullah Al-Ahmar leads a family which runs a vast financial empire and has a huge political influence in Yemen. Importantly, Hashid is also the tribe of the president, Ali Abdullah Saleh. Ahmar's resignation from the General People's Congress, the latest in a cascade of defections from the president's ruling party and inner circle.
Down with the regime, down with the liar, down the deceiver, down with injustice. We launched revolution in 1962 against the Imam, and now we're faced with a new Imam who's been ruling us for 32 years.
This latest defection will only serve to boost the resolve of the pro-democracy movement.
God willing, we will continue our protest until the regime steps down.
Ahmar's defection came as another tribe, Bakil, also announced its support for the popular uprising. Bakil controls vast territory in the north and is widely considered the country's largest tribe. For decades, President Saleh has been building strong ties with the tribes to consolidate his grip on power. Now that Hashid and Bakil seem to be abandoning him, the president may find himself almost alone and isolated in the face of a movement gathering pace and determined to oust him. Hashim Al-Bara, AlJazeera, Sana'a.
Now remember Tunisia, where arguably all of this uprising started. We've just got some pictures in from the country. Tunisian soldiers firing in the air using tear gas. This is an effort to disperse dozens of youths who broke shop windows in central Tunis on Saturday. Police told a Reuters reporter at the scene during the confrontation the youths were loyalists of the deposed president, Zine El Abidine Ben Ali. North African state, Tunisia's crime rates have soared since that popular uprising toppled Ben Ali. Only January 14th it was, and so much more has happened around the region since then. These are the latest pictures coming into us from Tunisia. Well, thousands of protesters marching again, this time in Bahrain, demanding the country's Sunni rulers stand down. The demonstrators massed at Pearl Roundabout. They marched then out onto a major highway. Police were deployed but didn't interfere with the demonstrations. They come as a prominent leader from the country's Shia opposition arrived home from exile. In his absence, Hassan Mushayma was being tried for allegedly plotting a coup, but now, according to Bahrain's foreign minister, he's been given a royal pardon. Yet another concession aimed at placating the country's Shia majority. Mshaima says the people of Bahrain simply demanding change.
I'm talking about dialogue now is not enough. Promising is not enough. We have to see something on the ground. Just by talking, because different times they promised before, but they did not do anything for the nation of Bahrain. Well, demands is up to the people on the ground who died on there and who faced everything just to get their demands.
And around the region we go, Algeria now, where hundreds of protesters have rallied again, demanding the resignation of President AlJazeera Bouteflika. The protest comes 2 days after the government ended a 19-year state of emergency, but Algeria's interior minister says demonstrations are still banned in the capital, Algiers. And Egypt, with the ruling military council, has apologised after military police beat protesters during overnight demonstrations in Cairo. The council said the violence was the result of unintentional confrontations between the military police and the youth of the revolution. It stressed it did not and would not issue orders to attack protesters, also ordered the immediate release of all those arrested on Friday night. Thousands of Egyptians had demonstrated again in Tahrir Square after Friday prayers. They want reforms to be enacted faster and ministers linked to the Mubarak regime to go. Well, the panel tasked with amending Egypt's constitution has also been unveiling the changes it proposes. Our correspondent Anita McNaught with more on that from Cairo.
The Egyptian constitution is long, 211 articles, and these proposals that the committee set up and reporting to the military high council have come up with touches on only 10 of them. Whether that will be far enough and enough of a reach to please the protesters and campaigners for reform here remains to be seen. They, broadly speaking, tackle three main areas. The presidential post itself, how long the term will be dramatically shortened, 2 terms only, a maximum of 4 years each, and the president will not be able to change the constitution itself to keep him in power in perpetuity. It touches on the nitty-gritty of the elections process, how the elections are supervised, getting the judiciary back involved in reviewing them, and also how complaints are handled. The idea being, perhaps pragmatically, that Egypt has to hold an election in 6 months, and it needs to be a credible election. So some of the issues that undermined the credibility of the elections last time are being removed. And finally, there are some proposals in place here to ensure that Egypt's draconian emergency laws, which have sat so heavily on the country for so long, are not immediately lifted, as the people campaigning in Tahrir Square have constantly called for, but at least from whenever these amendments are passed, if they are agreed upon and passed in a referendum in 2 months, that the emergency laws should only be agreed by one of the representative elected houses of the Egyptian parliament, and that they last for no longer than 6 months at a time. These measures from the people we've spoken to will be welcome, but many will say they don't go far enough.
So you see from all those reports, the revolutionary effect, if you like, is still very much in force right around the Middle East. Our focus, though, of course, at the moment is Libya. And we're going to talk to Nabila Ramdani now, journalist and commentator, live in London. And I believe, Nabila, you have recently met, perhaps interviewed, Saif al-Islam, the son of Muammar Gaddafi. What were your impressions of him, particularly in light of the type of rhetoric he's putting out now alongside his father?
Well, indeed, I have met and indeed interviewed Saif al-Islam on a number of occasions in Tripoli, in Paris, and also recently in London. And he presented himself as the champion of human rights, democracy, very much the reformer who was the coming man, capable of bringing about true democratic change in his own country. But he had been untested so far, so there was no reason to believe that he would do otherwise if he was given the opportunity to do so. But from what we've seen recently, the very sinister speech he made when he first appeared on the Libyan state television, well, it was very different from what we would expect from him. You know, the rhetoric was quite appalling, basically warning the country to get prepared for chaos and warning that rivers of blood were going to run through the country. Well, that was not the Saif al-Islam I met.
So why then does he just have to toe the party line, or the official line, because of the gravity of the situation and what the result might be?
Well, I think perhaps the true colours or the true beliefs of people really come out in a situation of crisis, and that's very much what we witnessed in in Libya. Who would have thought that within a week the centre of power, Tripoli itself, would now be threatened, and indeed that the eastern part of the country would be in the hands of opponents. Nobody could have predicted that. So I think the gravity of the situation led him to basically sympathise and support his father in his desperate attempt to remain in power.
How far away do you think the crumble is, if it happens? We looked at Egypt. I remember talking to you during Egypt, and that was 18 days in the end, and I described it earlier tonight as almost a decapitation in the end. This is a different move across the country as parts of the country fall. How much longer do you think it's got?
I think the situation in Libya is very different from the situation in Tunisia. Remember that Colonel Gaddafi has at his disposal a massive arsenal of weapons compared to the rebels. He's well known for supporting guerrilla groups around the world and indeed providing them with weapons, including groups like the IRA, for example. More disturbing, we know that Colonel Gaddafi has stockpiles of chemical agents, including mustard gas, and he said that he was ready to resort to that in case of if he were in a very tricky situation. So I think we are dealing with a man who is not rational. He's a bit like Hitler on his last leg, and he would be ready to resort to all sorts of dark and sinister tactics to prevent basically him from losing face.
Some thoughts there from Nabila Ramdani, live in London. We thank you for your time.
Thank you.
A look at some other news from around the world. Iran says its nuclear program suffered a setback. Fuel is being removed from the reactor at the Bushehr power plant for unspecified technical reasons. Now, Iran's envoy to the UN nuclear agency says the request actually came from Russia, which built the plant and provides the fuel rods. But the plant has also been hit by a malicious computer virus before. That's the Stuxnet virus. In November, Iran confirmed some of the computers at Bushehr were infected. Some Western countries claim the Islamic Republic is still pursuing a secret nuclear weapons program, not just nuclear power. Gunmen have attacked Iraq's biggest oil refinery, killing at least 2 workers and sparking a massive fire which shut down the plant. It is part of the Baiji complex in northern Iraq. Jane Araf's got all the details from Baghdad for us.